How did the war in Gaza affect the Abraham Accords? Did it break the peace or did the agreement survive the test?
Okay, so I don't think the Gaza war has undermined the Abraham Accords almost at all. And many people who don't like Israel or don't like President Trump's foreign policy or don't like the Abraham Accords themselves or don't like the closeness with the UAE and Israel, they would love to have seen this war, this brutal, horrible war we've seen in the last 2 years, damage the Abraham Accords. And as far as I can see, they haven't damaged them at all. For example, just to remind people, the Abraham Accords with UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and to a lesser extent, Sudan. So 1 week ago, I flew from Dubai to Tel Aviv. And I was lucky enough to be in the business lounge because someone paid for me. And there in this business lounge were mixing, because there were several airlines using it, mixing Orthodox Israeli Jews, Muslims with traditional attire, everyone getting on. It was all fine, okay? On a previous trip, a week earlier, I was in Abu Dhabi, and I read when I was there that Etihad, the national airline of Abu Dhabi, now flies 6 times a day to Tel Aviv. Both Abu Dhabi and Israel are small countries. That's 42 flights a week, more, I understand, than any other airline. Then you have, and of course, you also have dozens of flights from Dubai every day to Tel Aviv. I'm just giving an indicator that hundreds of thousands of people are visiting. There's trade, there's tourism. In Abu Dhabi, 2 years ago, there's something called the Abrahamic House, which the Emir built, which has a mosque, a church, and a synagogue. There's hardly any security necessary. There are people praying in all 3 parts of that building. You don't see this so easily in London or Paris, where synagogues now need security. Okay, you don't see that level of security in Abu Dhabi as you do in Western Europe. So in terms of trade, in terms of agricultural tech, in terms of desalination, in water desalination, in terms of tourism and various other fields, relations are good, certainly between Morocco and Israel and the UAE and Israel. Then we come to the point of why haven't other big countries joined the Abraham Accords recently? Well, first of all, some non-Arab countries have. Kazakhstan just joined, and Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan are about to join. But the answer to why Saudi Arabia has not joined yet, or Kuwait, I think that's not because of the Gaza war. That's because the Crown Prince, MBS, was very closely working with Donald Trump and Trump's advisors such as Jared Kushner and others. And when Biden won the 2020 election, just after, the Abraham Accords came into effect just before Trump left office, right at the end of 2020, and then Biden came in January 21, I don't see any push by Biden to continue the Abraham Accords because Biden said, we don't like MBS, because of the Washington Post journalist. They blamed him for ordering his killing. And, the new administration was not keen to work with the Saudis. And then there was COVID. It was hard to travel for a couple of years because of the COVID virus and so on. So the fact that Saudi Arabia didn't join the Abraham Accords was more to do with the fact Biden was in office. And I think Saudi Arabia will join the Abraham Accords. They're waiting for the right moment. And it's been delayed now, as I understand, because of rivalry between Saudi Arabia and the UAE about Yemen. So Saudi Arabia has slightly distanced themselves from Israel, but it's not because they suddenly decided to support the Palestinian cause in Gaza, which they have not been supporting for the last 2 years. It's more to do with power plays to do with the UAE and Yemen. And I think they will join at some point. Now, also you have Syria. It's quite possible that in some form or other, Syria will join the Abraham Accords. And that was, of course, unthinkable before the new government came into effect. I'm not saying they will, but the fact it's even being talked about is something. So in answer to your question, people who want to pressure Israel, especially in the West, would like to see Israel be isolated internationally. But I see very, very little change between relations between the Arab governments and Israel. I mean, no government has broken relations. Egypt and Jordan haven't either. And governments like Qatar that are close to Hamas and Iran, and in fact, Israel killed a couple of Hamas people in Qatar. And even though Qatar does not have officially relations with Israel, they seem to speak to each other at a high level almost every few days, having some summit, as close as ever. So I'd say that Israel has got fairly good relations at this point with the vast majority of Arab countries. And in time, they will also join the Abraham Accords, I believe.
In your view, when is the right moment for Saudi Arabia to join the peace process?
I think it depends on domestic issues within Saudi or on Saudi-American relations. I don't think Israel and Saudi Arabia have actually had quiet behind-the-scees contacts, I understand, as far back as the 1950s and 60s. There've been intelligence and so on. I understand, although there's no evidence, but I understand from good sources that Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel and the Crown Prince, MBS, have met directly on at least 2 occasions in 2 different venues. So it's not that Israel and Saudi Arabia don't already have a certain amount of behind-the-scenes cooperation, but it also depends on domestic Saudi. Saudi Arabia is going through a process of reform, of opening up, of maybe moving away from being so Islamic, giving somewhat more rights to women and more tourism and opening up. And I think that, having relations with Israel will fit into that pattern when they're ready. But I don't think there's any particular rush. They don't need to rush, and nor does Israel. And indeed, one of the reasons that Saudi Arabia wanted to be closer to Israel is they wanted Israel to kind of protect them against any threat from the Islamic regime in Iran. And in a way, they don't need Israel to do that anymore because Israel has all now damaged the regime. And I'm pretty sure that even though Saudi Arabia claims they won't let Israeli jets, fighter jets go through their airspace and so on, I imagine there is quite a lot of coordination behind the scenes, actually.
We have seen Syria and Israel negotiating for months. Where are those talks now?
No, there are quiet talks. Look, it's very different. Syria and Israel share a border. They share all kinds of vital issues. And it makes sense for the 2 countries. I mean, it would be better if they actually had a proper peace agreement. But even if they don't have a peace agreement, it's important they talk to reach understandings on all kinds of issues. And I believe that on and off such talks have happened in Paris. They've happened in, I think, Baku and Azerbaijan. Sometimes they're indirect through the Trump administration and so on. No, I believe there are talks going on, but, they'll want to keep them quiet, and it's good that they keep them quiet. They're more likely to, one of the reasons the Abraham Accords worked in 2020 is because they kept the media away. They kept people like you and myself away. And I'm not sure, if there's too much heat, it becomes politically hard, not only for Shara in Syria, but in Israel. People don't quite understand. There is a Druze population in Israel and a Druze population in Syria, also in Lebanon. And the Druze population in Israel actually are quite an important political lobby inside the Israeli Knesset. And they are very anti-Shara because they say he's an Islamist and he won't protect the Druze, and he's allowed some of his troops to attack and murder Druze and other minorities, Christians and Kurds and elsewhere. So there's a kind of pressure, and a lot of the Druze in Israel support the Likud party, the party of Netanyahu. There's internal pressures within Israel also not to be too close to Shara, but I suspect both Shara and Netanyahu, they've got policy advisors coordinating with each other, I'm sure.
UAE and Morocco have built strong ties with Israel. But what about Bahrain? Where do they stand now?
It always was less, but that's because they're worried about the Iranian regime. The majority population of Bahrain is Shia, and Iran, or rather the Iranian regime has its fingerprints all over the place, and the Bahraini government has to be cautious. But it's not as warm as the UAE, but nor is it cold. I mean, again, I travel a lot around the Middle East. I've also flown from Bahrain to Tel Aviv a little while ago, and things are normal. There's nothing weird or special about it. So Bahrain does not have as close relations. It's not as important as Dubai and Abu Dhabi are very important. They're very important generally now for world economics and international forum. So Bahrain is not as warm, but there's less to cooperate between Bahrain and Israel. There's less reason for them to be close. But again, there's a synagogue functioning in Bahrain now. They haven't cut relations. I mean, I would say Bahraini relations are probably better than some of the Jordanian and Egyptian relations with Israel, because Jordan has a big Palestinian population. And in Egypt, for one reason or other, there's a lot of anti-Israel articles and so on in the Egyptian media. And I would have thought that Egypt and Jordan, the two countries Israel's had relations with for much longer, although there's good security cooperation between Israel and Egypt and Israel and Jordan, it's not exactly warm feeling in tourism or in other fields. So not like there is with UAE and Morocco, where there was really a good feeling between Israelis and people in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And in Bahrain, I think it's probably better feeling than it might be in Egypt, for example.
Is there a real gap between what Arab governments want and what their people feel about peace with Israel?
Well, people say that about Saudi Arabia. I don't believe that's the case with the people in Morocco or in the Gulf. I mean, there's no, without putting it bluntly, there's no particular love for the Muslim Brotherhood among many people in Morocco and Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Hamas are the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. I don't get the impression there is particular sympathy for the Palestinian cause among the public of Morocco, not like there might be in Egypt or Jordan. So it's a factor. I don't think any of these governments can move ahead without taking into account public opinion. And it may be a factor in Saudi Arabia, but it's a cynical regime in Saudi Arabia, and they can manipulate their own public opinion. And I don't think public opinion is the reason one way or the other whether they do a deal with Israel. I think they'll do a deal with Israel when they think they can extract concessions from the United States and from Israel. I don't think the government in Saudi Arabia is so careful about public opinion that it will dress it up how it likes. And of course, if Saudi Arabia joins the Abraham Accords, a whole lot of other countries may join at the same time. They're waiting for Saudi Arabia. It's also a bit more complicated in Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia has custodianship of Mecca and Medina, and then you have the Al-Aqsa compound in Jerusalem. And I believe Saudi Arabia asked Israel if Saudi Arabia could also have control over that instead of Jordan, which Jordan doesn't like. So it's all a bit more complicated. They may be trying to extract different concessions from Israel. I don't think they're too worried about their own public opinion.
You often talk about the